unto Rhinelander, and I think that rises with the issue. Generally, a planning commission has absolutely no authority, I mean zero authority under the statute, if you read the statute, to make any changes with regard to annexation. That is an issue that is completely within the purview of the Common Council, not a planning commission, which is an appointed commission. They can give counsel, they can give recommendations, but they have no authority. However, under the city ordinances, the procedure that is outlined in the ordinance suggests that we have them look at this. However, to expedite this, it was my recommendation that we have the reading of the first, because that's another one of Rhinelander's unique ordinances, is that we have a first reading of the ordinance at this meeting. The Planning Commission that will be meeting in early January, they can take it up. They can make whatever recommendation they want, but it's going to be up to the council at the January, I think it's 9th, or yeah, is there 11th or not? I can't remember the exact date. 11th, yeah, the January 11th council meeting, that this would have to be acted on either favorably or not favorably. I'm not personally, but I have to go by with the ordinances that are passed. I don't think it's consistent that the planning committee is the one that holds a public hearing, but that's the way the ordinance reads here, and so I point that out to the council, and I hope that's one of the things that we can change in the future, because really the public should be speaking to the group that makes the ultimate decision, which is the Common Council.
Gerald, as we pointed out before, some of the work product or the policies that this body needs to address is cleaning up some of those ordinances so we can move more fluidly. You are correct. It seems pretty herky-jerky, but it's following basically what we have before us at this point and understanding that it needs to be modified.
The only thing I saw in the statute for the Planning Commission to do would be if there was a need to change the zoning in the process. But nobody's brought that up, apparently.
Okay.
I guess then it falls back on the question of how can we do a first reading of an ordinance we haven't seen yet?
Let me address the first question that you addressed. And the concept of zoning was already discussed. In your ordinance, it says that any parcel that is annexed is automatically coming in as a R1 zoning, which is consistent with the use, so there's absolutely no reason for the Planning Commission to discuss the concept of rezoning. Otherwise, I had talked, when I looked at this, that we would have to do that. Most communities don't have that automatic. This community does, so therefore that's not an issue. As far as the actual zoning ordinance itself, the ordinance as drafted, and it is drafted, and if you object to the fact that it's not part of the meeting tonight, I suppose that's a legitimate concern, but the ordinance specifically says that this parcel would be annexed to the city, and then if you read the ordinance under direct annexation, that means that this parcel, because it is contiguous with the city, would come into the city as an R1 lot and would be part of the city, and then also would be taxed as part of the city and would be have city services available. One of the reasons that we expedite, and I hope the council can appreciate this, is because this person is looking for clean water, and I think that's one of those essential things. So maybe it was an administrative decision to move this along rapidly, but that's what we're doing. I hope that answers your question.
Sort of. You mentioned the word contiguous, and that is another question in my mind. The map that's provided doesn't show it to be contiguous with any portion of the city at this point. And I understand that the water line already goes by there, so there wouldn't be any additional expense to the city. And in that regard, it sounds like a good idea. But I'm just talking technicalities, I guess.
And I'll be more than happy to discuss those if you wish. We've got 3 weeks to do that.
Eileen.
It's my understanding at this time that this is simply a petition for annexation, and so we're just recognizing the petition at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct. And Gerald makes the point he'd like to see what the actual ordinance would look like if we proceed with the petition. And we're proceeding with the petition. That's what we're asking you to do tonight.
Okay, so we're not setting policy here tonight. We're simply recognizing the petition.
Under the concept that the city of Rhinelander wants a first reading of anything that we're going to do, so it's that you've got this time period, which is generally 2 weeks, but in this case will be 3 weeks. Well, yes, because we're going to wait until after the planning commission, so it's really going to be 4 weeks.
I'd like to make a motion to acknowledge the first reading of the petition for direct annexation by Edna Sue Adams.
Daniel, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Ordinance of the second reading, ordinance of 2020-13, amending 4.02205A, all-terrain vehicle use. And this is where we crossed off Stevens Street as a section. This is one that, as it is a second reading, I did have a constituent send me an email to be able to speak, and I'll ask the public if they'd like to speak on this. And this came from Dell Bundy. And he said, "This is to make our objection to the opening of Stevens Streets to ATV travel. My wife and I both oppose it. We live on Curran Street and are familiar with the ATV traffic. It is our opinion that somebody is going to get hurt." So that is read into the record for that. Anybody else would like to weigh in on Stevens Street travel? Who? Andrew.
I received a phone call from that gentleman also. The one you just read the letter from.
Okay.
So I just let you know that he did reach out to me also, that he was not for it.
Is Tom?
I received a phone call from the owners of Oaken Bucket Resort. They're just a little off Stevens, and they are completely in favor of this because they are landlocked at this point, and that ATV traffic would actually bring more traffic to them. So they wanted me to mention that.
All right. Any further discussion?
I was concerned about, well, two reasons. One, why the Stevens Street originally was accepted from the ordinance, but what kind of problems we've had with ATVs over the years. And I talked with the chief this afternoon, and I wonder if he could address the whole group as to what issues he sees on this.
Sure. Chief? Chief also weighed in on the first hearing of this, and also the history on Stevens Street was given at that time, but I'd be glad to update.
The original thought behind it was because it was a 4-lane. But if you examine, and we've had our ordinance now for a year and a half, we've had absolutely very little problems with ATV usage in our community. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Have we enforced some ordinances? We've had, just like a person chooses to have too much to drink and drive a vehicle, some have chosen too much to drink and drive an ATV. But it hasn't been any injury accidents, or hasn't been any thing that concerns me. And when you look at Stevens Street, it's a completely different setup than you have on Lincoln Street. Lincoln Street, you have more hills, you have more curves, you have businesses that are more short-term. People go and leave. There's a lot more vehicle traffic on that compared to the Stevens Street. Stevens Street is wide. It's got plenty of visibility. Therefore, I would support opening up the full Stevens Street for ATV usage.
I have a question for the chief.
Yeah.
Has there been any ATV or UTV versus a motor vehicle crash in the city that you know of?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you.
With that, I'll accept the motion.
Are you looking to schedule a public hearing on it, or?
Zach? Asked Val if there had been a public hearing notice on this one, and there was not. And generally, she had said that this runs to the planning commission for the public hearing, but I'm not. ATV trail in this case. Oh, the annexation, sorry. This would be the second reading would be the public hearing, but you're. so-
Okay,
Yep.
okay. I was just wanting clarification on what motion you're looking for.
Okay.
To adopt or to set?
Correct.
So this is to adopt. All right.
Rossing, I would make a motion to adopt ordinance 2020-13, amending 4.02.20, parent 5, parent A, all-terrain utility terrain vehicle use.
Michalowski, second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries. Now, go ahead and ask for your amendment to the agenda.
Do I need to make a motion to?
Yes, please.
To amend the agenda to move sections B and C under item 12 for discussion at this time in the meeting as opposed to later, because some of these people would like to probably not sit through the whole meeting.
Holt, second?
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion's carried and the agenda is amended. Item number 12B, approval of a contract as recommended by the Wisconsin DOT with Running Inc. to perform shared ride taxi services for the initial one-year period of 2021 through 2025 RFP.
Rossing, I would make a motion to approve the contract as recommended by Wisconsin DOT with Running Inc. To perform shared ride taxi services for the initial one-year period of the 2021 to 2025 RFP.
Is there a motion? Is there a second?
Larson, second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion.
Okay. I understand emotions are running high on this, so it's my understanding we authorized Mr. Vruwink to open this contract for RFP back in August. Is that correct? Okay. And how many proposals were received by the city?
You want to answer?
Two.
Two. And the names of those companies, please?
Running Incorporated and the Rapid Cab Company.
Okay, and Shared Ride is a subsidized program that is funded by the Wisconsin DOT and the Federal Transit Authority. Is that correct?
Correct.
Does any money come directly from the city of Rhinelander?
There would be a local share in the event that the revenues do not exceed the expenses of the program. However, because of Federal CARES Act money in 2020 and 2021, we're expected that there will not be a local share to fund the service. And
Okay.
the budget we prepared and presented to the council that was adopted did not have a local share, if I'm not mistaken, Wendy. And it's somewhat dependent upon revenues, but
She's got
Yeah.
it.
yeah, maybe when I come to the
Absolutely.
podium,
Go
because
ahead
I'm
and-
sure there'll be some questions that I'll have, as the procurement chair, I'll have to
Yes.
send to you.
I would just like to explain how the funding works for the shared ride program. Each year, we have to submit an application for funding for the following year. Just last week, I submitted the application for 2021. We submit an estimate of what we think we're going to collect for fares, for revenue from the shared ride service. And then we take what the annual hours we are contracting for at the rate per hour that we are going to pay the contractor. And then we add in $5,000 for administrative expenses in-house, and then also the vehicle insurance that the city pays on the 2 shared ride vans. And from this application, they take the total expenses, subtract off our estimated revenues, and that's our deficit. Then they will give us a certain percentage of the deficit by federal funding, and then the state comes along and has another formula for what they will pick up that the federal grant doesn't cover. For 2021, with the CARES Act funding, there is enough to cover lost revenue that we normally would have had that we're seeing a decrease in now. So there is no local share for 2021 based on the estimates. I wanted to clear up another comment that was made, that it's going to cost the city $25,000 more for each year of these 5 years. And I want to clear that up. That is not $25,000 that the taxpayer is going to have to pay. That is being covered by the grant funding. If what we estimate in revenues, if the actual that we collect is less than the revenues that we estimated, there could be a local share. If our expenses exceed what we told them it was going to be, there could be a local share. There is no guarantee that there's a local share, but there's no guarantee that there's not a local share. We just have to wait until the year closes to see where the actual numbers come in at. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
How much do we receive from this program? How much money?
Yeah, Wendy, can you stay up there, please?
Yeah. Sorry, Wendy.
So for 2021, we have, like the total expenses are going to be like right around $720,000. And our estimated revenues are right around $220,000. So it's $500,000 for grant funding. For 2015 through right now of 2020, the federal funding that we have received is $1.3 million.
And that was over the span of 5 years?
Yes,
So a
correct.
total of it's not like, because I've heard the number 1.3 million bandied about, so I wanted to make sure if that was per year, whether
Not
that was
per
usually
year.
covers a 5-year contract then?
5-year contract.
Okay.
In order to get that federal funding, the city is required to have an FTA-compliant procurement process every 5 years. The city is allowed to pick whoever they'd want to contract for the shared ride services. However, if the company they contract with was not chosen through the FTA-compliant procurement process, the city will not get any federal funding. So then that would be a local share.
Tom?
So just to clarify that last part there to make it perfectly understandable. No matter who we pick, it has to be the one that scored the highest. If not, then that money is not going to be there no matter what.
Correct. We will
And then-
not get federal funding
And
if
it-
the
and-
contractor that we choose was not selected through the FTA-compliant procurement process.
And that's that point scale that they were judging through.
Right, and it's, the procurement process too is you are looking at these proposals, these 2 proposals. It's not based on history, it's based on their proposal.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Gerald?
Yeah, I think the public could use a little more explanation of what that procurement process involves. And it's a horribly complicated document, but maybe you could at least summarize what you can and what you can't do in that process.
Yeah, that's a how much time do we have kind of answer. So I guess in short, the procurement process as was specified and introduced at the first August council meeting was essentially we had to publish a request for proposals, which is a precursor to putting folks on notice in the public that the city will be soliciting and accepting proposals. At that time, we set a deadline of October for the proposals, in which the city then had to formulate a procurement committee, and the procurement committee is consistent with past practice. I will make a statement that the DOT switched to this procurement process in between probably the last, I think it's gotten probably more onerous since the last time the city went through it. But prior to that, there was not much to the extent that the city now has to comply with it as it is today, as it relates to being eligible for the federal funding. So I think that's really important distinction to draw over the course of the life of the city providing this service to the public and engaging with the federal government. The rules have changed and the requirements have changed. And so this solicitation was different than the last solicitation, as will probably be different than the next solicitation in the next round. But it requires that at a minimum every 5 years that the city go through this procurement process, again, to remain eligible for the federal transit grant. And further, so getting to the committee process, so the committee was formulated again based upon the same individual positions that the city had utilized in the last procurement. And then we, as a procurement committee, had to individually, independently review each of the proposals on their own merits. And we couldn't consider such facts of local, or we have personal knowledge, or we have personal experience. Any of those factors were ineligible or had to be considered excluded from the review process. And so as a group, we did it individually, and then then we had to come together and discuss our independent review. And all of that review, per the federal government, their requirements remains confidential. But what is public record and public information is the committee report, and that report has been shared with the council and with the public in the past, since the intent to award was notice was provided at our last council meeting. And so I'm not sure, Gerald, how much more you want me to go into in terms of specifics, but that would be kind of the high level. And I think, when there's discussion about a cost increase, it's important to note we can't compare the current cost, because this next 5-year procurement they're not mutually exclusive in that you have to look forward. We don't have last year's or this current year's numbers to compare to what the future service contract will be, because the procurement specified what level of service we wanted. So while the level of service is very consistent in terms of the amount of hours, the 24-hour service, indiscriminate use of shared ride taxi if you want to use the Safe Ride program, the Tavern League vouchers, those things are all remain consistent with the future procurement. Obviously, the contract and the result results in a recommended change of provider in this case. So you have to remember that the city is the subrecipient under the Wisconsin Department of Transportation of federal monies, and therefore we have to live with the rules that come associated with federal money, unless we want to backfill it locally with our own cost or charge for the true cost of the program, which is far more than the reduced fares that are currently being offered to users. So, while we may not like the process, in fact, many of us that have gone through the process can relate to there's probably an easier and simpler way, but the reality is we're using federal money in this case, and so we must very strictly adhere to their rules.
I think you covered what I would like to see covered, with one exception. Apparently, each of them had an opportunity at the end to change their rate, to lower it or whatever. And I don't understand quite how that factors in. But I guess the other comment I would make is the things that you said are excluded from consideration all seem very relevant. And I'm not happy with the fact that they can't be included. But if they can't, if we're going to get this money, I guess we have to do it.
Zach, are you allowed to talk about when the grading takes place? And he's talking about the numbers and then the adjustment of the numbers and how that procedure, I guess, went. Are we able to discuss that, just
Sure.
so people have an idea of how that works?
Sure. Yeah. There's the cost proposals, and then there's also the technical evaluation, right? The capacity, the technical competence, the professionalism,
Which is at which step?
That's in the first step, right? So
before
you see any price proposals. So the price proposal is protected until the second part of when the committee has to meet, and that's when we unseal the dollar figures. Now, Gerald said there was the best, what he was alluding to, I think, was the best and final offer. So the federal and state procurement guide indicates that you can ask proposers to submit a best and final offer, essentially their bottom dollar. And in this case, because the proposals were actually fairly close in price, we thought we would ask them again for their best and final offer. And so those were received. And Wendy can talk about the details, but the Rapid Cab Company's number came down more considerably than the other. But when you factor the compilation of the technical review and the cost, the running proposal still scored higher. And so I think that kind of gets to what both you and Gerald were maybe alluding to.
Right, and I just wanted to make sure that the public knew that they were, I guess, graded before there was ever any talk of what the price was that they were offering.
Right. And I think it's very intentional because they don't want you to allow price to weigh higher than what it should. And so that's where the blend of the formulas come at the end of the process. Wendy, did I miss any steps there?
Well, I can tell you that the initial pricing that came in, the two companies were within 3 cents of each other. And because Rapid Cab was 3 cents lower than running, Rapid Cab had a higher score on the pricing piece, which is one piece of the evaluation score. Then when we did the best and final offer, they both came down, but the spread was larger. It was a difference of 96 cents. But it was still, Rapid Cab was lower, so the scoring did not change. They still had gotten all the points for having the lower score. It didn't change the outcome of the final score.
Tom?
So just to be clear, the decision is not made because someone has a lower price, but on the point system. So if they have a higher point, they have to be awarded the proposal or the contract, or we don't get that federal money to run it. Mr. Schultz came all the way out here and asked 2 questions that I just want clarification on. Access to those minutes, is that possible?
As you stated
committee
earlier,
report.
the committee report is right here, and it was been posted publicly also.
Okay.
So.
Also, I am in the understanding that anybody can access the scorecard via public record.
The scoring
Is that correct?
is within the committee report.
It is, okay.
It's right on here, the page 2.
Okay. Safe Ride, that will continue. I just want, like, layman terms verification. Sure. It's going to continue, correct?
Yeah, I think the simplest way to describe it is because we use federal money, we can't discriminate. And so if you're a person with a shared Safe Ride voucher, we can't treat you any differently than if you were an Inclusa client going from your care facility to the grocery store. So it's still a shared ride on-demand service. So it doesn't matter who's paying for that voucher. Anyone that negotiates any sort of arrangement with the service would be provided equal opportunity for that service.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that
Appreciate
I
the question.
understood it.
It's one that came up, as
Yeah.
obviously the public it's a very important service to continue to provide the community.
Right.
Tom?
I'm just curious how many jobs might be at risk. Maybe Greg could answer that? No?
I would say it's sort of
Go ahead.
out of consideration.
It's off the topic that way, but actually, I'm going to have you speak there because we're live streaming it, and actually it picks up on the record.
I would expect some of our employees will hook up with the new company coming in. Upper management, mid-management won't, so for sure 3, possibly 4, probably a 4. So, and the other employees that don't take employment with the new company will, some might retire and some might get a job somewhere else. So probably 8 to 10 people will get employment with the new company.
Okay.
Thank you.
out of 22.
Ryan?
Oh, go ahead, let Tom talk first.
Oh,
One more thing that I've been hearing from a lot of my constituents that I said I would ask. Just because the other company scored higher in points, and it would appear that we would have to go with them to get that federal money to continue this program, that doesn't mean we have any authority at all to say Rapid Cab cannot run their business in the city. They can continue just like they do. They just won't have that government backing.
correct.
So I have a lot of constituents that are saying, how can the city government shut down a local business? And I'm like, I don't think that's what's happening. So I just wanted to clarify exactly the whole process, because there's a lot of really confused people out there, and I really want them to understand what's going on here.
And that's a really important point. The city operates as an agent for the federal government to operate a shared ride taxi service, right? Anyone can still operate a taxi business in the city in accordance with the city's rules and ordinances. If somebody wanted to start a Lyft or an Uber service tomorrow, they would just have to comply with the city's ordinances to do so. Mm-hmm.
Nothing else? All right.
No, I just want to say I was on the procurement committee, and I don't know if anybody had any direct questions for me, but I followed the guidelines of what we were given for the procurement process, and the scores are what they are with their guidelines, and it was done correctly.
All right, for the sake of the fact that this is a contract, we'll have Val call roll.
Michalowski.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Excuse me. Rossing.
Aye.
Kelly.
No.
Barnett.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Holt.
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Approval of the contract with Running Inc. for the lease of the two city vehicles. I'll accept the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the contract with Running Inc. for the lease of the two city vehicles.
Holt, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Again, Val call, oh, do you have it?
Nope.
Val call roll. Yep.
Could you please state again who made the motion and the second?
I made the motion. Daniel?
Holt was second.
Thank you. Okay. Daniel.
Aye.
Rossing.
Aye.
Kelly.
No.
Barnett.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Anderson.
Aye.
Holt.
Aye.
Michalowski.
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Flipping back. Monthly reports from departments. Clerk's Department. You have anything to add?
Nothing to add.
All right, thank you. EMS and fire?
Nothing to add to Chief Williams' report.
Engineering? Finance department? Fleets? Golf course? Inspections? Legal, this was an addition to your packet, was in your mailbox. Anything to add?
Nothing to add.
All right. Museum complex. Parks, buildings, and grounds. Nothing to add. Police?
Nothing to add.
Streets?
Nothing to add.
Tech?
Nothing to add.
Water? Haha.
I just wanted to make everybody aware of a long-time employee retiring. Tim Ostrike will be leaving. His last day will be January 8th. He's been with the city 36 years. Actually, Thursday will be his 36-year anniversary. So I just want, if you see him, wish him well, and he's earned it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Is that a position that will be open?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Wastewater? I'll accept the motion.
Motion to accept the reports as presented.
Mikulowski, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Reports accepted. Report from the Board of Commissions and Committees. Page 35 in your packet is the committee meetings from the tree board. Is there anything to add to that?
Nothing to add.
All right. I'll accept the motion.
Motion to accept the reports as presented.
Larson, second.
Give it to Larson.
All right. There's a motion and a second. Once again, sometimes these commissions and reports are there just for us. Sometimes it also serves as a public announcement too, when we talk about what we're replacing for trees or some of the other things that are happening too. So just so people are aware. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Introduction of new business. Mayoral appointment of Mary Ticknor and Melanie Freilich to the Rhinelander Housing Authority Board of Commissions to replace Donna and Susan, who are retiring.
Motion to accept the mayoral appointments of Mary Ticknor and Melanie Freilich to the Rhinelander Housing Authority Board of Commissioners.
Daniel.
Anderson, second.
That was Gerald with the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Approval of $2,750 payment to ESRI for ArcGIS licensing facility online mitigation. This is page 37 in your packet.
Migration. You said
Sorry,
mitigate.
sorry.
I just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll make a motion to approve the $2,750 payment to ESRI for ArcGIS licenses to facilitate online migration.
Holt, second.
It's a motion and a second, and due to the fact this has a dollar amount, Val, please call roll. Oh, discussion if you would like any. Okay.
Rossing,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Barnett,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Holt,
Aye.
Mikulowski,
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Guys have a motion carries. Approval of the 2021 non-union working resolution 2020-23. It's page 39 in your packet, and moving forward from there. It's a little hefty.
I'll just make a quick note. It's not been too long since you approved the 2020 working resolution because of the outstanding negotiations with the police union. So because we want to not have to do pay and that type of thing, calculations, we've accelerated this to be on the calendar before the calendar year turns. So there really aren't any major there aren't any changes really to the text. The wage scale remains the same. Of course, you already approved the 1% non-union wage adjustment in the budget. So this is just a cleanup item formality associated with allocating positions and the wages thereof.
Motion to approve 2021 non-union working resolution 2020-23.
Michalowski, second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Should that be a roll call?
No, because it was already budgeted and they approved the budget for it, so I really, it's approving the agreement of it for the budget. Anyway. All those in favor? Sorry.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you. Approval of the contract with MSA Professional Service to perform a housing needs assessment in a CDBG planning grant administration. It's page 43 in your packet.
Rossi, I'm going to make a motion to approve the contract with MSA Professional Services to perform the housing needs assessment and CDBG planning grant administration.
Michalowski, second.
Discussion. Eileen?
This is part of the grant process, is that correct? This is something we need to have in place in order to move forward with the grant, is that correct?
Right. We need to have a contract with the firm that's going to do the work, and that's the first part of this. And they're going to, because CDBG administration is an eligible expense from the grant, we're going to have them perform some of the administration, and it's fairly onerous, so it's a good use of grant dollars for that. It's a 2-for-1. I also say you'll at the January meeting, you will approve a resolution after the public hearing happens at the Planning Commission for the actual application for the CDBG grant. So this is just getting the work started, and then we'll be able to approve the resolution at the January meeting again after the public hearing happens.
So this basically gives us the dollar amount to put into the grant request.
That's right, and it's a 2-for-1 match. That's the other notable item is the CDBG. It's worth the onerous requirements because you get $2 for every dollar the local municipality invests.
Nice.
And for clarity for our constituents and taxpayers, a little bit different than even some of the other housing needs we've done so far. This really identifies our housing needs when it comes to applying for other dollars to make sure that we have them. So the first set of developers that came out of wherever understood there was a need and it didn't have to apply for those dollars. So this gives us that platform as far as moving forward and assessing the needs of our citizens. All those in favor? Oh, wait a minute, it's a contract, isn't it? So, call roll. Oh, you have discussion first or no?
We just had discussion.
I know, Dave's got his hand up, kinda.
No.
Yeah. I'm trying to catch 2 cameras, whatever, so anybody who even flicks a fly, I'm gonna call on them.
It's like an auction.
What's that?
It's like an auction.
Yes. Don't wanna miss a bid. I'll call roll? Yeah.
Kelly,
Aye.
Barnett,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Anderson,
You're on mute, Gerald.
His lips moved.
You could be eating.
Aye.
Holt,
Aye.
Michalowski,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
Rossing,
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Resolution 2020-24 to adopt CDBG Citizen Participation Plan, pages 50 through 53, I believe, in your packet.
Rossi, I'm going to make a motion to approve Resolution 2020-24 to adopt a CDBG Citizen Participation Plan.
Holt, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? This is, once again, just the homework that needs to be done to get this part moving. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Resolution passes. Resolution 2020-25 to adopt the policy to prohibit the use of excessive force to enforce applicable state and local laws prohibiting physically barring entrance or exits from nonviolent civil rights demonstrations. This is page 54 in our packet. And again, this is just housekeeping.
Do we have to make a motion before we discuss? Okay, I'll make a motion to accept Resolution 2020-25 to adopt policy to prohibit the use of excessive force and to enforce applicable state and local laws prohibiting physically barring entrances, exits for nonviolent civil rights demonstrations.
Michalowski, second.
All right, there's a motion, a second. Discussion.
Can someone clarify this for me? Because I don't know what this is about.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, especially for local government to agree that we're going to enforce local laws, right? I mean, it seems sort of counterintuitive that we're going to agree to do that when we already should be and probably
Right.
already are doing that. So essentially this is part of that suite of 4 resolutions that the city needs to approve. I will say, just as with the previous item in 2015, when the city went for, I think it was $500,000 for Brown Street renovations, CDBG Public Facilities was the program. We're using a planning program. And so all of these same ordinances and resolutions would have been adopted around that time. However, it's likely that there were changes. Now, the chief and I had a conversation about this, Chief Gauthier and I, because there's a statement in the phrase at the bottom about the council directing the police department to bring things in compliance, and we've gotten concurrence that our local policies are already consistent with the rules that the state statutes and the federal government. So while the language is a bit direct, it's nice to know that we're already compliant. So it's really a formality at this stage.
Okay, so it's just basically letting them know we're already enforcing laws that we already have in order to get the grant.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Eileen, do you have something?
No.
Okay, your mic is on, I just want to make sure.
Oh.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Now that the mayor's back, we're moving on to G.
All right. Resolution 2020-26, adopt the residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan. This is page 55 in your packet.
I will make a motion to approve the resolution 2020-26 to adopt a residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan.
Barnett, second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Resolution 2020-26 passes. Approval of Resolution 2020-27, addition of a $400 fee for non-emergent lift assist EMS service calls into the fee schedule. This is page 58 in your packet. You can stand up if you'd like. I know Terry's explained this to us a couple times over, but if anybody has any questions, they can ask them. I'll accept the motion.
Rothstein, I'm going to make a motion to approve Resolution 2020-27 for the addition of the $400 fee for the non-emergent lift assist on the EMS service calls into the fee schedule.
Daniel,
Larson.
second.
Larson with the second. Val. Discussion.
I'm just going to say I've seen a lot of these in my career, and it's something that these guys go on a lot. So for them to get called out someplace and to not get any compensation for it or very little is it's not good. So I think this is something that will help out with our budget.
To be clear on this is specifically to assisted living and nursing homes that call us that don't have a medical emergency, so it doesn't happen very often. They're starting to call us because
just a little bit closer.
They're starting to call us because they've reduced staffing levels. So they're calling us to help transfer them from the kitchen into their beds, or if they call us, if we get called because they fell or they're ill and we don't transport them, there's no fee.
Val, call roll. Oh, sorry, is there more discussion? Sorry. Val, call roll.
Barnett,
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Holt,
Aye.
Mikulowski,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
Rossing,
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Resolution 2020-27 is approved. Approve application to the PSC for a simplified rate case water. This is page 59 in your packet. You want to speak to this, or?
Sure. Real briefly, this item is the final utility rate review as we discussed through the budget process. Because our water utility is regulated by the Public Service Commission, we have to follow their procedures. I included a few supporting documents in the packet as well as sent some out via email indicating kind of a little bit of research for you as to where we fall in our rates for our water service. And so it's likely that because this process does not require a public hearing, that was one of the questions that was raised. The simplified rate cases do not, but we do need to provide public notice, and so we'll be doing so in the proposed draft notice that I included in the packet. The one thing to note is if the PSC indicates that we must do or that we qualify or that we must do a rate review, a rate adjustment, it's not negotiable. So know that by proceeding with an application, will commit us to doing a water rate case or water rate adjustment. But you'll see in there's a not to exceed amount within that. So that's all.
I'll make a motion to approve the application to PSC for a simplified rate case.
Anderson, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
As I read it, it's talking about a $2 a quarter increase for an average customer residence.
Correct. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Open records request, we asked for this to be on there just due to being over inundated with them. That being the case, does anybody have anything they'd like to discuss or bring up at this time? All right, moving on. Stevens Street pay application number 15 in the amount of $373,935.94. A request from Musson Brothers to reduce the retainage contractually required in the previous agreement on the project. This is page 62 in your packet.
Would one of you guys be able to speak on this a little bit and explain it better?
Sure. Yeah.
So in regards to this topic about the reduction retainage, I'm going to give you a brief overview of how the project's going. And there's a couple topics I want to discuss to lead you into the topic of the retainage and what Bill's requesting. So first off, I want to just go through the project itself, how it's went from our point of view. I want to go through contract incentives, how these contracts are set up for incentivizing the contractor to perform on these jobs. Go through the retainage itself, seeing that is a specific topic of discussion tonight, and then the pay request. So as far as the project itself, we're through the second year of construction. We started in 2019, started at Frederick Street to Dwight. Utility work went great last year. We did have some issue with project completion last year. I'm sure you all recall the cold snap we ran into. The contractor was unable to complete restoration work, some concrete work, some asphalt work. That also led into some question about the concrete itself that was poured in the cold weather. And we discussed this at last meeting when we had the change order for the extended warranty. That concrete was tested. There was no frost damage. We went through that. There was an extended warranty because there was low air in some of the concrete that was tested. So all the regular rigmarole went through on that, and that eased some concerns about the concrete that was poured in cold weather. Through the winter, the contractor maintained driveways to resident satisfaction to get them through till the spring, and all that was was completed in the spring of this year and into the summer. This year, the contractor got an early start. They started in March of this year with underground. Through the COVID pandemic, which actually aided in the speed of construction this year. It left open a couple additional crews from A1 who did the utility construction. The contractors actually completed this year's construction a month early, which was fantastic. The contract itself, so the contract was set up, the original contract amount was for $14.25 million. We have just over $1 million in change orders on this contract. Sounds like a really big amount. However, consider that we added Pinos, Pueblo, and Lincoln Street onto that. Those three items make up about $780,000 of those change orders, which leaves the remainder to be about 2%, a little over 2% of the original contract amount, which is fantastic on a project of this scope. Generally, we consider 5%. We anticipate about 5% overages and change orders on this. So the contract, cost-wise, ended up really well, and we would anticipate that the contract is going to come in just a touch under budget when we're all said and done. For next year, remaining items is the asphalt paving, the final surface course of asphalt from Dwight to the bypass, striping, and there'll be some restoration to do there as well. And final completion per the contract is July 2nd. So we'll be wrapping up right before Hodag Fest if we have one next year. So that's the contract itself. I think it went very well. It was a good project. Within these contracts, and this kind of leads into the retainage conversation, there's incentives built in for the contractors to complete work. First of all, there's liquidated damages. That's a per calendar day cost to the contractor if they don't complete a project on schedule. That's set up in there. Next, we have retainage. Retainage is set up through the final completion of a project. That's set up for the contractor to incentivize them to complete the project as a whole. And as we find items, we do walkthroughs periodically through the projects, substantial completion, final completion, and we provide punch lists to the contractors. Cracked concrete, potholes that we saw on the asphalt by timber on Stevens Street last year, restoration items, any utility items that we run across. Those are added to the punch list so that retainage is held to incentivize the contractor to complete that work. We had some larger items on this project. There was a manhole at Pueblo, and I think these were all discussions through the course of the summer. There's a manhole that the contractor put in this summer that was leaning. Contractor came in and replaced that. We had a couple laterals. One was back pitched. We had one lateral that was connected to one lateral from the main connected to a dead service on a vacant building. All those things were resolved, brought to the attention of the contractor. They acknowledged it. They repaired all those items at the contractor's expense. That's what the retainage is intended for, to incentivize the contractor to do that. Most contractors don't need that incentive. Good contractors will just repair their work as it comes wrong, as need be.
Mark, question mark. So what does it mean to reduce the retainage then? So what, is there something left over then, or what? I don't get it. I'm not following you.
So I'm leading into that. So now,
I just want to make it clear that I wasn't tracking with you completely. So
yeah, okay, that happens to me a lot actually. Right. So a reduction in the retainage, you're holding a certain amount of money from the contractor. Right now, you're holding about $750,000.
Okay. That's what I was looking for.
Right. And the last incentive I'll throw out there, which kind of plays in the retainage, is the warranty period. Once the contract is final, retainage is reduced to zero. You drop it down, you no longer hold any money from the contractor on this contract. They're paid in full. Then starts the warranty period. That's where there are bonds on this contract. The contractor is required to hold those bonds through that warranty period. If the contractor doesn't resolve those issues, the city can make claim on those bonds, and that's what they're set up for. So there's incentives through this whole thing, and everything has a purpose throughout these contracts. So the retainage itself, as a typical contract, per state statutes, the amount that you can retain is 5% of the work complete up until 50% of the total contract is finished. So, say on this contract, it's a $14 million contract. Once you hit $350,000, you can no longer keep retainage. That's a standard contract, a non-rural development contract. However, with rural development, they have different language. So this is federally funded. It's the city's getting about $10 million in loans and grants. So their wording and the retainage is different. They hold 5% through the entirety of the contract until final completion. The reasoning for that is they want to put a safeguard in place for the city and for the funding agency itself. Make sure that you're getting a satisfactory project when it's all done. So they put that in place, and per the contract, what's being held is exactly per that contract. We're now holding $747,000 in change. What Bill's going to request tonight is to reduce that retainage from 5% to 2.5%, which would equate to 5% up until the 50% of the project, and then no retainage thereafter, which would be a standard contract. Now, rural development has it written in, and this is what Musson signed. This is the contract and the agreement that Musson signed, that it's 5% through the final completion. However, rural development first approached me a couple months ago and said if the city wants to reduce the retainage, we have no problem with it. So they always hold that in case you get a subpar contractor that you really have the need for. They felt that the project was going good. If the city would like to reduce it, you can go ahead and reduce it. There was an email exchange with myself and Scott, a representative from Rural Development, that states that with some stipulations that they would like some written notification from the city of why you would like to reduce it. So that's out there. Rural Development has basically given you go ahead to reduce it if you feel it's necessary. Again, I will say Musson sign the contract at 5%, so there is no obligation on the city's part to reduce that at this point. Going into the pay request, you will notice that the pay request is for that exact amount, that reduction in retainage, reduced by $373,000 and change. So the exact amount for that pay request is for that retainage reduction only. There are no additional items that were completed on this pay request. The pay request is in the amount for $373,935.94. If the city, and you'll notice this pay request is unsigned by me or the contractor, if the city chooses to reduce that retainage, I would also recommend it.
Thank you. Bill?
I had a question.
Yep.
Do we know approximately how much is still, in dollar amounts, how much is still needed to be done before July?
There's about $530,000 worth of work. And that's something I should touch on as well, that another incentive that's worked in to this is the pay request itself. So the contractor is not paid for work that is not completed. So the final striping, the final lift of asphalt, that has not been paid to the contractor. They have not received a penny on that. We will also hold money if we feel something is not satisfactory. You know, we ran into an issue with restoration, and I'm sure you're all aware. There was a restoration issue on that south end, south of Dwight. We're holding money from the contractor. They went and did some necessary repairs on that, and we're anticipating in the spring everything's going to look fine. But we didn't see the grass take like we would want to, so we're holding that money until we actually see that restoration come to fruition. So to answer your question, there is about $530,000 worth of work yet to be complete.
Thank you. Bill? Well, Bill's coming up there. I'm going to give everybody the taxpayer layman's terms of this. Is one, a retainage is something to prove that we end up with a quality product. Usually, though, at some point, if X amount is significant completion, as he said, you pay it back. That being the case, as a rural development contract, typically they say hold the 5% till whatever. That being the case, that's not typical. Plus, we have a substantial amount of the work already done, and they have bills to pay. And this is Bill.
Mark pretty well covered the whole thing. I don't have to say too much, but before I start, I'd like to thank the administrator and the mayor and all the council members to taking time and to listen to our case that we're presenting here. As Mark said, we're here to petition the city to reduce our retention from 5% to 2.5%. Right now, like Mark said, you're holding about 440 or 748,000. As you know, the project went smooth, as Mark said. I mean, like I said, he took all my fire. So I'm going to repeat everything he says here. Even with the 3 additional projects that was added to the contract, we still finished ahead of schedule. I'm going to hit on some of the issues that we had this year, and you are going to have issues on a big project like that. For example, Mark hit on it, the 2019 concrete issue. In the spring of this year, we came in and removed and replaced, at our own expense, the sidewalk and the curb that the city and Town and Country deemed was substandard. We also, like Mark said, we also added an additional year of warranty on a portion of that 2019 concrete. He brought up the restoration issue. We went in this year, again, at our own expense. We removed some of the topsoil, we replaced the topsoil. Our landscaper who does the seeding looks like he came around, and things are starting to shape up and starting to green up, as you saw late this fall. And once again, he did bring up an issue about a sewer lateral that got missed. And when once that was discovered, our sewer contractor remobilized all his equipment and a crew to connect that sewer lateral. The work also included the asphalt pavement. You know, that was, and I feel, and I think everybody else feels, it was done in a timely manner at, once again, no expense to the city. So what we're trying to convey here is that any issue that came up over the last 2 years, I think that we rectified them in a timely manner, and it did not impact the schedule, and there was no expense to the city. And one more thing I'd like to bring up was the 3 additional projects that we had, you know, with Pinos and Pueblo and Lincoln Street. And these 3 projects were added to the contract by using what they call a change order. Normally, the unit prices that are established during the competitive bidding process are null and void during that process. So what we do during that process is we negotiate a price with the contractor, the engineer, and the city, but we didn't do that on this project. What we did is we used the competitive bidding price for those 3 additional projects. So in good faith, like I said, in good faith, we honored our competitive bid price that was already established. And so what we're asking you in good faith is to reduce our retainage from 5 to 2.5%. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
In Zach or Steve's experience, is this acceptable? I mean, is there any concerns with this?
We met with the contractors, and I would politely say we grilled the daylights out of them. Because it is unusual that you would change your retainage figure when you have a written contract. The suggestion that we left them with, given what has been said here tonight without repeating it, is it would be totally up to the council, but it'd have to be predicated on the council finding good cause to do that. And I suppose good cause has, to some degree, it's not been a good year for a lot of families, and it's a COVID year, and I suppose, you know, that's justification. And I think they did what they said they would do, and they came to us. You know, a lot of people would have just been angry when we said, no, you got to come to the council to do it. So to answer for the administrative team, we're comfortable with it.
Thank you.
To add to that, we thoroughly vetted this through our department heads, the people monitoring it. All questions were asked. It was an amicable discussion, and so therefore it's on your agenda. It wouldn't be brought forth if we didn't feel that it should be brought forth. Did you want to say anything? Nope. All right.
Rossi, and I would make a motion to accept the Stevens Street pay application number 15 in the amount of $373,935.94. It's the request from the Musson Brothers to reduce the retainage contractually required by previous agreement in the project.
Daniel, second.
Before he does that, can you add to that and direct the Zach to write the letter to the U.S. or RSD?
USDA Rural Development.
Rural Development that says the council approves this. I know the vote says it approves it, but we also need a letter.
Okay, so and to direct Zach Verwink to write a letter to the U.S. DOT?
No.
USDA Rural Development to
approve this.
Approve the
reduction.
Okay, to approve the reduction.
It was just the part that they asked for, so I'll make sure we have it in record.
Daniel, second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Val, please call roll.
Larson,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Holt,
Aye.
Mikulowski,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
Rossing,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Barnett.
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion carries. City-county jurisdiction transfer agreement pertaining to East Timber Drive. It doesn't say drive on there. East Timber from Highway CC, page 82 in your packets. Pretty simple.
Was what?
82? Is that right?
Let's have a motion first, and I'd like to speak to it, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
Could somebody just clarify first where, I don't know where Highway CC is. I know where Highway C is.
Have a motion made. Can you make a motion so we can speak to it?
Yeah.
please?
I move that we approve the city-county jurisdictional transfer agreement pertaining to East Timber Drive.
It's motion.
Holt second.
Thank you. Discussion.
Okay,
Steve.
now I can tell you all about this. Okay. This was an anomaly in the records that it goes back to, well, it goes back to like 2005 or 2004 when the county actually voted to give this piece of land back to the city because the city was going to improve it. And this property has theoretically, under county resolution, belonged to the city since then, but the city never got about to accepting this property. That's why you're going to see designations of roadways that probably don't even exist now, but did exist in the old county resolution, and I tried to follow the old county resolution as closely as I could so that anybody historically or in the Register of Deeds office that would try to sit down and look at this, they could track it from what the county did back in, and I'm quite sure it was 2004, to what we're doing in 2020, it would track. The other aspect of this, and I think this was brought out by Gerald, it seems like this creates an island, but it really doesn't, because this is a roadway that, and these are the areas that surround the road right away, and the roadway is being owned and maintained by the city at this time. So it really doesn't. It's a continuous, and I think it's timber, is if I took it into the city's language, it's Timber Drive, out to 17. So basically, this is a piece of land that stopped somewhere in the city, went out to Highway 17, that was Timber Drive, that for years everybody thought belonged to the city, and it probably did, and we're just cleaning it up.
So this is basically just housekeeping.
Yes, that's very, you can call it housekeeping, yes. Or county keeping or something.
I got into trying to figure out what was described here and was a bit mystified as to why the section would be longer on one side of the road than the other. And then I went out and looked at it, and I think it became pretty clear that it's the way the snow plows drive. If a county plow is trying to clear that intersection, they have to come east a bit, and they can't turn because of the divider between the lanes. And in the other direction, they go straight on through.
Yeah, if you look at the actual picture, it's very strange, but it is the highway, and it is right away, and it's more than the necessary right away, so the city does have extra land.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Bills and claims in the amount of $1,320,360.08, page 84 in your packet.
I'll make a motion to approve the bills and claims in the amount of $1,320,360.08.
Holt, second?
All right, discussion. Real quick on discussion points before this, because I know bills and claims, they come around in the packet when we sign it, but it's pretty quick and whatever, we have access to it. But one of the questions I had recently is where on our bills and claims ledger does restitution show up? I asked Wendy for that prior to, and so she handed me the sheet. It's from the period of 1/20 to 12/20 when it comes to wastewater. Restitution was paid to the city from H&H Septic in the amount of $4,132. The reason I bring that up is the police record also has a different total for the amount of loss during that time. And the amount of loss during that time was $402.02. So we're just putting that out there as far as the ledger goes. When we have restitution paid, that does not have to do with the services that were lost. Questions?
Yeah, if I could, I'd like to ask Steve Sorensen to explain what restitution is in this case.
Well, you could never define restitution except in the context of where it's ordered. The court, in a court situation, and that's what we're talking about, in a court situation, a judge in a civil and in a criminal case can listen to the evidence, or a jury can, on the civil case, it's rare, well, you can't. A jury would not determine restitution in a criminal case, only in a civil case. And what they would do is they would try to ascertain how much the party lost, and then they would say that the party that had committed the tort or the violation or had committed the crime then would reimburse the person for what they had actually lost. So that if somebody smashed my car, you know, with a baseball bat, and it cost me $5,000 to repair it, and they went to court and the person was found guilty of criminal damage to property, which would be a crime, they may be able to pay a fine of $1,000 plus restitution in the amount of $5,000, because that's what it cost me to fix my car. So restitution is supposed to be to compensate you for what you have lost. Now, there's no magic that says that a court ever has to order restitution. A lot of times courts don't order restitution because they say, well, this person's going to jail for the next 35 years. They don't have any money anyway. Why would I order any restitution? But it does also become a flux factor in a lot of plea bargains where a person will say, rather than going to jail for a long period of time, how about if I pay restitution? And the court may say, yes, as long as you do, we'll reduce your sentence from 2 years to 1 year. But there's nothing magical in a criminal type case with what the amount is or what it has to be. It's probably a better gauge in a civil case where you'd have a lawsuit where the restitution would be what was damaged. So in other words, if there had been a charge of criminal damage to which is an intentional tort, in a civil case, you'd probably pay exactly what the $5,000 was. But in this case, and what you're talking about here is a criminal case, and it was a crime, and the judge ordered restitution in a given amount. It did not reimburse the city for the actual amount the city determined they lost, but it was the amount that the court or the DA or whoever negotiated the settlement or the agreement came up with. So it is intended to help the city reimburse itself for what it lost in this fact situation.
Thanks.
Ryan?
Do they have to comply with any sort of victim, with the victim being the city, any sort of victim rights, or was this an agreed upon thing that the city had agreed to? I guess for Steve or Chief Gauthier or the mayor?
I did not receive anything that said that this is what we would be paid in restitution. No. Chief, would you like to?
This is a resolution from a criminal investigation where the district attorney chose to reduce it to a violation of a DNR regulation, with the agreement that they would make that forfeiture or that restitution payment to the city. The city had, the initial argument was it should have been a higher amount, but the DAs ultimately had the choice and decided that amount.
Does that make it an admission of guilt, though, too, if it's a decision?
It's an agreement between the two parties.
Okay, thank you. Eileen?
Can I ask how the determination was made on the 31,000 as to what the criminal act was, that they determined that the city was out 31,000 in theft?
I don't want to get into detail with that tonight as it's not an agenda item, but it certainly will be available tomorrow through an open records request.
Thank you. That being the case, any other further discussion? Val, please call roll.
I want to make one, so everybody understands, there's no automatic requirement that restitution ever be paid. But it is a tool, like I said, in a plea bargain. And I think you understand that plea bargains are used for literally thousands of reasons. Court efficiency, recognition that it's going to take too long, too hard for the county or the state to prosecute. So it isn't always a quid pro quo. You know, you took $1,000 from me, so you give me 1,000. So there's lots of factors. So just so you understand that. And then there's always the proof problem. I mean, I can say that I lost $100,000, but I got to prove it, you know, and that could take more effort too. So just don't draw quick conclusions. You know, it's always like reading a headline and thinking what you know the story says, and we know that that's not always true.
Val, please call roll.
Anderson,
Aye.
Holt,
Aye.
Mikulowski,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
Rossing,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Barnett,
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Motion carries. Families First Coronavirus Response Act pertaining to the Protective Service application. Ryan?
Yeah, I wanted to point out one thing regarding this, because I was trying to actually get some clarification myself. This was something that was sent to us from our police department employees. And so I just was looking at this document, and on the back page, it says under the Act, special rules apply for healthcare providers and emergency responders. And I'm not, I just want to make sure that what we do is correct and we follow the Act that was put into place and what we're allowed to do. I think that our Rhinelander police officers, our emergency responders, shouldn't be excluded from anything that maybe another employee in a different capacity gets. But I want to make sure that maybe Steve Sorensen can speak on this for me because he can explain it better. But that we don't allot something or award something based on an act that is not appropriate.
Steve?
Yeah. So under the Act, Congress explicitly left out what is being referred to as, or exempted, I guess is the better way of saying, exempted from the requirements of the law. It exempted employees that were what they referred to as essential services, which were healthcare providers and emergencies responders. In the administrative ruling that the Department of Health and Social Services Wage and Hour Division, when they wrote their specific rules, they even made that clear to note that law enforcement was considered part of the group referred to in the Act as emergency responders. So there's no question that firefighters, law enforcement, EMTs, they're all covered as exempt, and they're not covered under the Act. So there's nothing that the city could do under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and the money that was required to be paid by businesses that weren't exempt because they were small businesses. That was the other exempt category. So you couldn't pay money out under that, so you couldn't get reimbursed under that for those employees. There were certain exceptions in the Act for administrative employees who would be working in law enforcement or be working in healthcare or who would be working in but only administrative personnel would be covered and they would have to be eligible for it. So the bottom line is that this Act doesn't create a special rule in the sense that you can give money to people from this fund that fit into that category. It explicitly exempts. Now, the logic behind that, according to the government, not according to me, but the logic behind that was that we had to ensure that those people retained their jobs and that they were paid for the work that they were required to perform. And the fear under the whole concept was that because of COVID-19, people were not going to be able to come to work because their employer was going to shut down their workplace and then there wouldn't be any work. That's why all the money was put into it. That's why they changed the Leave Act. That's why they did all these aspects to try to keep the economy going. But they didn't worry about healthcare providers and emergency responders under the Act because they felt that they would be going, so to speak, to work. And they wanted not to give any encouragement for them not to go to work. You can debate how appropriate that is or not appropriate that is, but that's the law. I mean, you can't change that. And I hope that clarifies the fact.
Eileen?
Clear as mud.
Yeah.
So basically what you're saying is there is not money in that Act for our police department.
Well, for our fire department.
Or for our fire
EMT.
department, or for our EMTs, or for our paramedics, and for our hospital workers. There is no money in that account for them to be covered under this Act. So even if we would love to give it to them and vote to give it to them, that would come then out of the city budget, which I'm assuming has not been budgeted for. Am I correct?
Yeah, overtime, but otherwise no.
Overtime. Okay, so basically the money's not there
In this act.
in this act to cover police for COVID-19 purposes when they had to take time off.
Correct.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so I think Chief Gauthier, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, I think some of the employees, from some of the conversations that I've had, or been expressed, there was a couple emails sent out, was that they were, employees were told that they could not come to work because they were either doing a self-quarantine or they had a close contact. And obviously you didn't want to bring that into your department, or Chief Williams didn't want to bring that in and affect or infect his other employees, which could potentially shut down the whole operation. Am I accurate in that statement?
Yes, as the chief, it's my responsibility to manage my staff and to keep my staff safe. Otherwise, we can't be at work and we can't serve the community and keep the community safe. So there were many incidences where employees had to quarantine because of either close contact with somebody that tested positive, or on the back in March, when it was uncertain the extent, I had employees that were traveling, and some of them were ordered by me that they could not return to work until they did a quarantine. So there has been significant amount of sick time used by a certain number of my employees to adhere to the CDC guidelines and also the public health locally guidelines. All the way up to just a couple weeks ago, I had employees that were off. And there's disparity between my support staff, who did get 80 hours or is available to get time, whereas my patrol sworn staff does not get the time, and they're the ones that have used considerable amount of time. One employee specifically has used a lot of time just because of the contact that he's had with different people where he had to quarantine. So that was their request, is to be eligible to receive the up to 80 hours. The association did their own research. They found other communities that have granted the time. I think Wausau was one of them. So they, again, brought the request forward through a written request that was sent to each of you by Detective Sergeant Josh Camilleri.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is if we.
You got to also recognize you have a union contract, and if we're going to reopen the contract, which we'd have to do to deal with this isn't just voting. I mean, it's not as simple as you'd like to make it sound. I mean, this means that we'd have to contact the union, we'd have to reopen the contract, and that would be something you'd have to consider too. And again, remember, this law was not to compensate for people that were staying home because of COVID. This law was for people whose jobs were eliminated or were not allowed to go to work because they couldn't come to work because their jobs were closed down. That was what the intent of the law was. And some people think the law was intended to cover sick leave. It was not. Now, it used sick leave as a methodology of paying people, but it was really intended to pay people that couldn't come to work. So you have to understand, this was supposed to be for people that lost their jobs or were unemployed or couldn't find work because their employer was shut down. I mean, you have to understand the concept behind the law too. People have made this into a health law or a sick leave law. It's not that. So I want you to understand that. I mean, if you're voting, and I'm not taking a position one way or the other, I just want you to understand, don't beat up on the law because that wasn't the intent. And the other thing you have to be cognizant of is we have a union contract. Now, we're going to be starting negotiating the new union contract fairly soon, like in about 3 weeks, and we just signed the last one, so I'm not real excited about reopening it, but that's up to you. We can do that.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to punish our first responders for being first responders, and maybe our administrative staff could look into other ways outside of this act if there's a way to, you know, if Chief Gauthier or Chief Williams has to order his people to stay away, and they don't, you know, they're not sick themselves, but they have to stay away from the department. Maybe there's something else that Zach or Steve could research and let us know about. I don't know if this, from what our Attorney Sorensen is saying tonight, if we can approve this act, the Families First, it doesn't apply.
No, you can't, you'd have to vote to somehow create a new category, a new, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we have to remember it's a lot about FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, in terms of protecting people's jobs if they are mandated, as was said, to stay away. So I think the question is a little bit bigger than probably what maybe the employees have framed it for the council, right? And I think it also goes to the sick leave banks and the sick leave policies. It gets into the item later, but the city provides a different sick leave allocation to those that are under protected agreements versus non-union. And it's my understanding that the police union receives additional 36 hours of sick leave more than our non-union folks. So there are some other considerations, I think, beyond more to the question about how are we compensating these folks that need to be, that need to quarantine or have a mandatory quarantine from a health agency.
I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate the city on the fact that we hired our first HR generalist. Tom, you go there first.
I have to agree with Ryan. These officers protect us. They protect our city. They protect the people within it. And, if they come into contact, as you know, you come into contact with people every day at your job. But they're out there on the streets and going around the community, and they're doing the right thing by staying home if they come into contact with COVID to protect the rest of the community. I would also like to see if there's something that we can do to establish some help for them when they have to do that. I find it, just me personally, I see as much money as it is going to per se the golf course. And that money could go a long way towards something like this. That's something that could be useful to the city and its employees. So that's my 2 cents.
Eileen?
Can we make a motion to simply direct Zach and Steve? Can I do that now?
Go for it.
I'd like to make a motion to direct Zach Ruwink and Steve Sorensen to look into alternate methods of somehow compensating our officers and other emergency workers when they have to take time off for COVID-19 purposes, perhaps starting with Wausau and how they got around it. That seems, since that was mentioned directly by Chief Gautier as a possible starting point. That's my motion. That was really long.
That was really long.
Holt, second.
There's a motion and a second.
Val, you need her to write that down for you?
Yes. I'll tell you later.
Any further discussion? Yeah?
It sounded like Val wanted that repeated.
Okay.
You want me to simplify it? I'll simplify it.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to direct Zach Ruwink and Steve Sorensen to look into alternate methods of compensation for our emergency workers when they are required to lose work time due to COVID-19 purposes. COVID-19 circumstances.
Sounds good.
You'll second it? All right.
Yes, I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Discuss and establish a sick leave donation policy, and this would be...
So, yeah, certainly it's connected to the last item. In short, we've got some new hires, and Chief can speak to it in his department. But our sick leave policy is based upon, I would like it to be a more progressive longevity-based program. So the longer you're here, the more sick leave you accrue versus when generally an employer, you start with an employer, you accrue some level of paid time off, even if it's a pro rata for the year on a calendar basis. So Chief could talk a bit more about the issues that he's encountering specific to his department.
Sure. We recently hired a new officer in September, and mid-October, he was quarantined because he has close contact. So he had to take some time off, and he was able to use the time that he had to cover those days off. Well, then recently, he unfortunately had another close contact, which required him again to quarantine, and he didn't have enough time to cover all the time that he would need. So the city forwarded him a certain number of hours to get him the pay during the time that he was off. Internally, we talked about it, and to being a new employee, being on field training, there's projects that we gave him to help his learning, to help him that when he did come back to work, he'd be a little bit further in the program, because he took this time when he was home quarantined to study, to do assessments and tests as part of the field training program. And I approved him being paid for doing that work at home. During that time period, I had another employee, a long-standing employee who is at a higher pay grade than the new officer, who came forward and says, I want to donate these number of hours to cover that employee's deficit. As a patrol officer and part of that association, they earn 5 hours of sick time a month, or a pay period. And so it would be, is it pay period? Yeah. So they get 10 hours a month that they're earning. Their shifts are 12 hours. So it would take him many months to get back to zero. And of course, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and this employee could be in close contact. We follow the CDC guidelines when we're working, meaning that they're wearing masks, they're washing their hands, whether you're in your office or you're on a call for service. We're going back to winter months where it's going to be getting cold, so it's really hard to get people, when they go to someone's residence, to get them to go outside to have a conversation when they were in the sunlight in summertime with the heat. But now with everything being closed back up, homes, people don't want to walk outside, and so you're having more contact with people in the residence, which is close contact. So he could get it again. But this 10-year employee says, I'm willing to donate these many hours, and you don't have to calculate my hourly rate to their hourly rate to figure that out. I'll just do it hour for hour. His thought was it was a benefit to the new employee because it gets him back to zero and he can start building his sick time. And it also a benefit to the city because the city's reducing that 10-year employee's sick leave at a higher rate of pay. So that was the request that was authored to Zach by one of my 10-year employees to consider. Apparently this has been done in the past for employees who've had a serious medical illness and had needed additional time off. So that was the backstory to why this request came forward.
And while I'm not an administrative law professional, I can say in reading some preliminary research on this, it's not as simple as we create a bank and we do this exchange of donation. There's some rules. So just kind of bring it to your attention that if there's sort of the consensus to create this opportunity, that we'll have to draft a policy and bring it before the council for your approval.
For my own purposes, even with discussing these things, one, I'd like to tell you, even directing the staff to do it, they really do already do it. They're already looking at these things. That being the case, and when Steve brings up negotiations and contracts, there's a reason that retirement age, when you have jobs that are at high risk, can be at 50 or 52 or 53. Also with the buildup of sick leave that then they can retire with a chunk of if they don't use. So they're protected well in that contract to begin with. That's why they have that sick leave. Granted, not on the front end maybe, or not, there's those exceptions, but at the same time, they've negotiated those things because of that. I say this as an essential worker who's been quarantined twice already, and yet I still have to go to the hospital to work because I'm an essential employee. There's reasons to protect the health of our city and our country that way, where they need respiratory therapists. They can't have us all calling in sick. So it's the same thing. There's a balance in all of these positions that's a lot more intricate than just receiving an email saying, hey, we should be able to do this. There's a fair amount that's gone into this for years leading up to, and coronavirus, we're in an exceptional time. There's absolutely no doubt about it, but making the correct decision, as Ryan pointed out, moving forward for the totality of this is key. So our staff will put their time and their effort into this.
One question regarding the sick leave donation. Wendy, is there a way to do a vacation donation? Instead of a sick leave donation, vacation time, if you have accumulated time, if there's a policy that we're going to incorporate sick leave or potentially incorporate sick leave, could we look at also somebody who may want to just donate their vacation time to somebody who maybe has cancer or is going through something that they burned up all their time and employees wanted to donate their time to that person? Is that something that would be able to be incorporated since we're looking at this?
So the last time this was done was many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been within the last 7 years, and we'd have to do research on it.
Okay.
But I just wanted to add for food for thought. When an employee reaches retirement, that they decide they're going to retire through and start collecting their pension with WRS, they are allowed to take, it's different settings for different groups of employees. The non-union employees are allowed to take up to 1,000 hours of their banked sick leave and have it put into a VEBA account.
Mm-hmm.
The policy is allowing employees to accrue, like the non-union, this is just an example, the non-union get 8 hours each month, and some long-term employees are over the 1,000 hours of their sick leave banks. So if somebody has, say, 1,100 hours, it would not hurt that employee whatsoever.
Right.
They would not be losing anything, but it could be an additional expense on the city because it's time that we wouldn't have paid out.
Right.
So I just wanted to keep that in mind too, is the higher banked employees can essentially donate some time because it's not going to be useful to them unless they get sick. But I mean, they're not going to be losing out of their payout when they're in retirement.
Right. I know that the county does have a plan for vacation donation. I don't think it relates to sick time, but definitely vacation. Our county has done that because I've donated time to people who have needed it in the past. So something to look into.
Yeah, I had another question or thought to add to that. While we're looking at it, my only experience with this and donating sick leave to others is within a singular organization, the singular contract for all employees. Is this something that has to be within a specific department? So it has to be specifically within the police department, or is it something that can be across city or departments?
In my limited research, it has to be indiscriminate where goes into a bank and then people can request it, and it's
Okay.
not a person-to-person transfer,
okay.
Which is, I think, the way a lot of folks maybe interpret it, that they would like it to work that way, and it doesn't work quite
No,
that
thanks.
way.
Carrie?
I just want to speak a little bit of what Ryan was saying is, with the county, we have a lump sum, so we have paid time off, which includes our sick time and vacation time and holiday time. It's all one bank to begin with. So we don't have those times separated out like I think the city does. So that said, there is a policy that we are able to donate time to other employees but I think the caveat is that they have to have exhausted all of their vacation time and, well, it's their PTO basically. So in order to make them eligible, and I believe it has to be health related as well. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. All right, so moving forward, we'll leave this as another work product. Introduction of unfinished business. Discuss the search and consideration of allocation of resources to perform the candidate search. This was added to your packet. I thought I had handed it out to be in the packet, but it came in later. It is a proposal of the different services, and you have to go to the back actually to get to the point where there's a breakdown on it. But once again, on page 13 of the package is the different hourly rate for the different parts that we would need to do as far as that goes. Now, to their standard, I'd question whether or not we've done it to that standard for each part, but that's also where we can decide as far as we can take care of that to their standard as far as that goes. This is for your consumption to be brought forward in a motion, hopefully in December 28th when we come back, that if we have that meeting, to allocate funds that you would see fit as to what we need to do in the next near future as far as, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, if you want to shop this to other places too, we can open up as proposals or whatever the case might be. But we just wanted an idea if it needed to be broke down or if it was a singular contract, and that's what I brought forth. All right. That's that. Once again, take it home and read it. Approval of the contract as recommended by Wisconsin DOT. Oh, we took care of that. All right. Discuss police fire commission residency requirements as referred from the PFC, and that was a letter you had received twice in your packet prior. Go ahead, discuss.
Is this open for an action item?
All things are open for an action.
Okay, then I would actually like to make a motion to direct city staff to come up with language to remove this. I am in favor of removing that language for the residency requirement, and I left you a message to explain. I don't know if you got it. And the reasoning behind it is that I am not in favor of legislation that doesn't have a very specific purpose. My determination, listening to all voices here, certainly PFC has made this request. I think it's a reasonable request. I've not received any justification, any explanation that I think rises to the need to have it. I've heard people say on numerous occasions, well, it's self-evident, it just makes sense. Well, that's not an explanation. That's not evidence of how does it affect, come up with a specific reason why this would affect the execution of the duties of that. And at the end of the day, it's still incumbent upon the mayor to present their nominees to the council for acceptance or rejection. So it may indeed prove to be a moot point. Regardless, I simply am a stickler for not having useless legislation and ordinance.
Yeah, as I said, we have a policy sitting, so the action is we already have a policy if we're going to change the policy. That being the case, even when it comes to this seems to have been a decision that's been made based on circumstance at the time, not based on true policy. That's something I find pretty, we'll call it irritating, because it was just made based on a convenient point at the time rather than this is what we choose as a policy for our city. You're right. I haven't seen a compelling argument one way or the other. That's why I've left it alone, but it's on here. Waiting for that compelling argument to sway us to make policy.
I'd like to give it a try. If we're open for discussion.
Give what a try? Just curious.
He would like to compel me.
To come up with the justification.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
I mean,
I did make a motion. I was waiting on a second.
Oh, sorry.
I do acknowledge that the 3 seconds passed, but that was also in the context of you responding to me. So
Correct. Is there
if
a
somebody
second?
would like to make a second on that. Yes, I made a motion to direct city staff to come up with language to essentially nullify that requirement of residency, commensurate with the request by the Police and Fire Commission to do so. They sent a letter requesting that for relief from that restriction, and that restriction's only been in place for a few years, and even absent that restriction, it's still up to the mayor. So that's my motion, is to remove that restriction of residency.
Okay, I will second the motion. So we're not voting for the ordinance at this point. We're just voting on, I want Gerald to be clear, we're just voting on drafting rewriting the ordinance on which we can vote at a later time and discuss the ins and outs and whether we should do it or not.
Correct. Any further discussion on that point?
Yeah, I just, I do agree with David. I just, when we're gonna change it, I think it's important to change, I think it says right now it's currently resident, to give some sort of guidance to whoever's gonna draft the ordinance to be changed. I don't know if David wants it to go back to what it was before, as citizen. I think citizen is a good word of Rhinelander. I think it should be somebody who is in the community and who is invested. So just keep that in mind moving forward with the drafting of, or the changing of that ordinance.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those,
Do we have a
think-
second or?
Yes.
Did you second? Thank you.
There ought to be more discussion. First place, but it's,
Yeah.
all we're talking about is deleting one sentence from that ordinance. That's all. And that was added a couple of years ago. It's not that complicated a motion, but why are we voting on it already?
we're not, we're voting on directing staff to write it up as such.
If I could, for a point of information on
What's
this.
to write? It's
Go
just
ahead.
deleting
David
the whole
Holt.
word.
For
David
a
Holt.
point of information on this, the ordinance has to have 2 readings.
Yes.
So what we're doing is we're wanting to move forward with that, with drafting that, which would be, yes, deleting that sentence, potentially deleting that sentence, but potentially clarifying the language. As Ryan just pointed out with regard to, there was clearly an issue of clarity, and so it may indeed be more than just deleting that sentence. I definitely favor ordinance that is very clear in its intent. For example, citizen versus resident, right? Citizen of community versus resident of Rhinelander municipality. But we're not voting on the ordinance itself, absolutely.
May I speak on the issue?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know the history of this, I'll admit, but it seems like what was adopted in 2017 was just to clarify what was already obvious before that, or should have been. And I still think it is perfectly simple logic that a commission of the city ought to be made up of residents of the city. And look at it this way. If I went to Minocqua or Three Lakes and asked their boards to be appointed to their planning commission or some other board, I'd get laughed out of the room. And I don't see why we ought to take this any more seriously than that, except look at it this way. In a sense, we are saying that out of a population of 8,000, we can't find enough people to run our boards and committees. We can't find qualified people within our citizenry. We have to go outside. I think that's an insult to our people, really. And I think the reason they feel that way, that they're going to feel insulted, is because it's been the same people on a lot of these boards for many years. And a lot of people feel like, well, why should I volunteer? Because they're just going to, the good old boys are going to stay in power, so to speak. And I think that we're at a point now where the people of the city have voted for 4 new council members within a year. I think they're saying they want some change. They don't want the good old boy network. And the way to show them that we've got something better is to encourage people to volunteer for these committees and say that they'll be seriously considered, rather than the same old people staying in there forever. And I'm not saying some people shouldn't stay for a while, because institutional memory is important too on these boards, but it shouldn't be stuck in the mud. And we could do a lot better job of encouraging people to participate in city government if we say that now things are open for them to be involved. And I'd say try that for a while before we try to make any changes on something like this. I would also point out that in the course of this evening, in one of our previous motions, we actually set up a committee which says it has to be made up of city residents. Just this evening we did that. So just for consistency, I think that's the correct principle, and I think that we should take a positive view of this, not the negative one, and say that we want to encourage people to participate.
Thank you. Tom?
I don't think that, I think that what Gerald is saying is, I agree to a point. But why can't we still encourage people to participate, even if that gets changed, if that sentence gets taken out? There are a lot of people that live outside of the city limits that own businesses here. They pay their taxes through their business to the city. They have a lot invested in the city. I would dare say people who own the larger businesses that don't live within the city have a substantial interest in making sure the city succeeds. I don't understand why we have to make this, just inclusive, especially when the mayor has to bring any appointees in front of the committee, and if they're not qualified or we don't deem them to be a good person for the job, then they're not going to get in anyway. So for me, it's kind of here nor there with this. If we just limit it like we do right now, then we could potentially be missing out on someone very, very good for the job, someone that's perfect for the job. I think vetting any future participants is going to be key. And I think that this new committee or council is well prepared for that, especially seeing what's happened in the past. Like I said, I agree with you, Gerald, to a point, but I think that we need to broaden our horizons a little bit too, and not shut people out just because they don't live within the limits.
Thank you. Eileen?
Again, to Tom's point, we're not saying, we're not excluding folks from, say, Minocqua or Antigo or where have you. But if someone lives a mile outside the city. They have a business in Rhinelander, they workshop, basically their other than their house is in Rhinelander. They're right now excluded from being part of that board or that commission. So we're not saying it's going to be exclusively people from outside of Rhinelander. We're just opening up the pool of potential candidates. And to Tom's point, the city council has final say on who becomes part of that commission as it is. I mean, if we don't want the gentleman from 5 miles out of town, then that's what it is. Simply opening it up to more candidates can't possibly be a bad thing.
Andrew.
I would just urge people to do the research on why this was put in place. Look back at the past council and you'll kind of see. So it's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Mayor.
All right.
Mayor. Can I say something?
Oh. Man, some people leave the red on all the time.
I know. I'm sorry, I should have raised my hand. I guess I have a direct question for Gerald, and I guess it would be, so does someone who is on the board or on the PFC who has done a good job, and then, for example, moves into out of the city of Rhinelander into Newbold, for example, does that make them less invested in the community of Rhinelander? In your opinion?
Less invested isn't the question. It makes them not
That's my
citizens of
question.
Rhinelander, and I think people have learned to accept that over the years with some grumbling. And I guess there's some grumbling going on now, but the principle stays the same. It's not about widening the pool. I mean, we haven't even worked the pool here in town without going out.
Right.
I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
And one other point too is,
That's
if
exactly
you've got
how
people
this
who
happened.
want to be on the board purely because they have a business here, that may introduce some conflicts of interest that we don't want to get into. I don't know.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
I don't think we are narrowing the pool. We're just leaving it where it ought to be.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Gerald, that there is not excellent people within the city limits of Rhinelander that would serve perfectly on the Police and Fire Commission. I'm not disagreeing with your comment on that. My statement was that somebody who has done a great job, and just because they move a mile or two out of the city limits, would that make them ineffective and uninvested in the city of Rhinelander? And then my second point was that you said that we just passed something tonight, and that had to do with the CDBG, and that specifically says citizen. It does not say the word resident in what we passed tonight. So citizen would have been what they used in the previous ordinance that was changed back in 2017.
Tom.
Ryan, part of the history.
I guess we'll get into a discussion about that, but citizen sounds like resident to me.
Gerald?
Part of the
Tom.
history of this was a gentleman who was on the Fire and Police Commission and moved out to Pine Lake. And he was taken off of the Fire Police Commission, and we appointed somebody that lived in the city. And I would ask maybe Mr. Sorensen to give us a little background or his take on this whole issue.
Well, it's your choice, but if you're going to start opening up the beyond the residency, you better start having some very specific guidelines. Otherwise, you're going to open this up to Pandora's box. What you're doing, I'm afraid, and you can all do your own, you're thinking of individual people, and that is absolutely the wrong way to legislate. Never, ever legislate based upon people you know or people that are in positions. You must legislate on what can work in the future, what can make sense, what's, as David used the word, clear and concise. And so, I mean, I'll write the ordinance, but I'll tell you right now, the direction you've given is poor, because the word citizen means, to me, it means resident. I mean, that's what it means to me. In fact, I was just looking it up as you asked me to speak, Tom. But the bottom line is, I would come right back to you and say, what kind of a citizen? Citizen over 18, a citizen who has a business in town, a citizen, in other words, if you're gonna start putting those criteria on, they have to be justified. Don't create another problem is all I would say to you. But I will tell you, based on the cities I've worked with over the years, residency on commissions and councils is almost universal. But some cities are different, but if you look at, let me use Appleton as an example. You move from Appleton to Grand Chute, you're off of anything in Appleton. You move from Grand Chute to Appleton, you're off anything in Grand Chute.
And actually have
I mean,
intergovernmental
and
stuff.
those, you talk about two communities that are symbiotic. I mean, they live right on top of each other.
And I think that's why that is. The Grand Chute people don't go to the other school. They're in a different school district. There's people in Newbold and Pine Lake and.
Grand students go to Appleton North, so they're in the same school district as Appleton.
One of the things I'd like to point out is something I said earlier, not given circumstance, but coming up with policy is what we're doing here. So I would challenge the whole council right now, because we already have a work product to come out, and we'll discuss it again as that comes out, is to really look at the policy of how you pick somebody from our police and fire commission. Not given our circumstances or anything else, but actually just giving sound body of ideas. Do that homework when you come forward, because once again, when you do it based on circumstances, those change all the time.
I agree with you, and I agree with what Steve Sorensen just said, that currently the language is poor. And I am not explicitly saying I demand that it be one way or the other. I think that we need to have clear and concise language in our ordinances, and that's why I'm asking for this. The Police and Fire Commission clearly wants us to look at it, and that's why I'm asking for that, which is my motion, which is still on the floor, which I would like to have voted on.
Yes. Called or
call the question, yes. I would like to have the question called.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Did you get that? All right. Motion carries. Discussion of notice requirements specific to 4.07 zoning, hearing on application. This came from Anderson, and I believe you all got something at the 11th hour today. I'm not sure where it is. Actually, I got it right here. Once again, since this came at a late time, we can always move this ahead as far as that goes, but it is in front of you.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until our December 28th meeting, so we have more time to research.
Barnett, second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Is there discussion on the table? No. Nope. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I didn't hear you.
Nay.
Thank you. All right. Motion carries. Next.
Well, note that it was carried by 2/3.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to call?
You don't need a roll call because you only had one nay.
Yeah, gotcha. One nay. Carried by 2/3. Discuss the one-year extension with Green Gulf Partners for management of the Northwoods.
Can I speak to this, Mr. Mayor?
You can. You wanted a motion before, though, but.
Yeah, I
I'll
know,
give it to you
but this one I just wanted to get out on the table because I don't know that we need a motion of any kind right now, but we probably will at the December 28th meeting. I asked that this be put on this because at this point, the research and the work that I've done and some of the stuff that Zach's done has really left us in a position it's going to be almost impossible for us to get to a contract with a third party other than the person that's there. We can certainly work to tighten up the terms of the contract. We can make it, what we've talked about at meetings in the past. But I think that it behooves the city, rather than the city suddenly become the one that's going to be managing the golf course come next spring. Because even though it doesn't make a lot of money, maybe not even make enough money, it costs a lot of money if we let it go fallow. And we've got some issues with the contract as far as how we have title to it. And all those things need to be worked out over the winter, and it'd be nice to know that we at least have 1 year with them, and we tell them it's 1 year. And then we've got time to move on. That's why I recommended this be on the agenda, and just kind of from a negotiation point of view. And I asked that it not be in closed session too, because I think you guys all need to let the people know that we're not committing to the future, we're committing to right now.
That being said, I'll take a motion at this point, and then we'll see if it dies or not, but
I'll make a motion to draft a 1-year contract offer for Green Golf Partners for the management of the Northwoods Golf Club.
Holt, second.
there's a motion and a second. Discussion.
The word,
Tom?
the word extension on the agenda, should that be in the motion? I think the assumption is that things would keep going essentially the same for a year.
No, we've already told them that some of the terms would have to change, Gerald, so
Okay,
extension only in Senate, it's still them, but there'd be probably different terms.
With those, I just want clarification, that the new terms would come to us so that we could see it before anything gets signed or anything like that, right? Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Motion carries. Closed session, if necessary, to convene into closed session per Wisconsin State Statutes 19.85 1E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, investing in public lands, or conducting other specific public interests whenever competitive bargaining reasons require closed session. The discussion of property sale by the city property and discussion of employment contract with Zach Ruink.
Holt, I will make a motion to go into closed session for the above stated purposes.
Barnett, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Roll call.
Roll call. I can't tell if it's roll call coming in or out. Roll call, Val. I get that one wrong every time.
Holt,
Aye.
Mikulowski,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
Rossing,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
Barnett,
Aye.
Larson,
I will abstain.
Anderson.
nay.
The ayes have it. We're entering the closed session right away. Thank you. tell me when. All right, we're back in open session. On the portion of discussion of potential sale of city property, there's nothing to report, no action to be taken. On the discussion of the employment contract for Zach Ruwink,
I will make a motion to extend Zach Ruink's contract.
they're not going to be on.
They're not going to come back in.
After close.
We do have a quorum. It's
Yeah.
only 2 people, so we had 6
Yep.
people. Before I was rudely interrupted, I will make a motion to extend Zach Ruink's contract through February 28th of 2021.
Daniel second.
There's a motion and a second. Val, please call roll. Sorry. Sorry.
Mikulowski.
Aye.
Daniel.
Aye.
Rossing.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Barnett.
Aye.
Larson and Anderson are absent from this one. Okay, Holt.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Motion carries. Future agenda items are listed. Anything else, please email into Val, Zach, and myself. Actually, do it as a collaboration of all three, so we make sure it gets on there.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, I was just gonna say another future agenda item that I know, our fellow council, did you mention that? Gerald wanted to talk about, closed session.
Yes.
And I think we should get that on there, and that way we can discuss it and, move forward with whatever we're gonna do.
Specifically, it was closed session, remote Zoom meeting in closed session.
I'm going to bring you a proposal, because actually, if you're going to institutionalize this kind of usage of the people attending via Zoom or whatever, you really do need to have
security.
You have to have an ordinance that allows you to do that. Robert's Rules of Order under Section 9 allows for electronic meetings we're under Robert's Rules, but only if you make a resolution that authorizes it. Now, you did that during the emergency order, but I think you all know the emergency orders are all gone. Some will expire not until the end of this month, but unless new emergency orders are put in place, you won't have that protection. But if you still want to do that, you're going to need to have some type of an ordinance that tells you how, where, when, and how you do it. And so I put together what I would look to be a sample ordinance for you to look at, and I'll have you that for the next meeting.
Thank you. That's the case. We're adjourned.